If it breaks in this town, we dig deep till we know the truth. This is America's Radio News.
Afternoon edition.
Keeping you up to date with the latest breaking news on the afternoon edition of America's Radio News. This is Ernie Brown and Molly Page with these stories coming up for you.
It isn't just the Health and Human Services Department they'll have to deal with in the future. It's the IRS that's going to be breathing down their neck when it comes to health care.
Why does the Obama administration want $500 million for the IRS?
He doesn't have, photographs or videos of a child to sell like Casey Anthony did to raise money for her defense. So I understand why, he needs to go out and try to raise money this way.
George Zimmerman goes online with his side of the story.
He was absolutely fearless. He would get to the very core of the story. He loved villains. He loved villains because they made such great copy.
Morley Safer remembers his friend and colleague, Mike Wallace.
We're crossing the country and circling the globe to bring you all the latest news. Police documents show that the two suspects arrested in a shooting rampage that terrorized Tulsa, Oklahoma's black community and left 3 people dead have confessed. The documents say 19-year-old Jake England confessed to shooting 3 people and 33-year-old Alvin Watts confessed to shooting 2. The explanation for a shooting spree may lie in a killing that took place more than 2 years ago. England's father, Carl England, was fatally shot in 2010 by a man who had threatened his daughter and tried to kick in the door of her home. The man was black, and police say Jake England may have been seeking vengeance when he and his roommate shot 5 black people last week.
Police are praising Washington State middle school students who safely stopped a school bus after the driver apparently was stricken with a heart attack. Jeremy Witchick grabbed the wheel, steered the bus toward the curb, pulled the keys from the ignition, and started chest compressions after the driver slumped over and passed out yesterday morning. The 13-year-old told King Television in Seattle, "I was just thinking I don't want to die." Another student identified as Johnny Wood hurried down to help with the chest compressions. Other students called 911. Police in the town of Milton were there very quickly. The 12 students escorted off the bus. The driver, who's 43 years old, was in grave condition at last word. The superintendent said students go over emergency procedures several times annually, learning what to do if a driver gets incapacitated, and they reacted appropriately.
Well, Los Angeles police are out in force for opening day at Dodger Stadium. A year after the brutal beating of a San Francisco Giants fan, the LAPD says officers and the Dodgers have been working for months on a plan to ensure today's early afternoon home opener against the Pittsburgh Pirates is peaceful. Police say officers began patrolling parks near the stadium last night to make sure no park ordinances are violated, especially those related to alcohol. Last year, Giants fan Brian Stowe was punched in the head, kicked, and slammed to the ground after the opener. He's still recovering. 2 men have pleaded not guilty to charges of mayhem, assault, and battery in that attack.
Alan Donis joins us. He's a writer, filmmaker, comic, radio personality, and author of Patron Saints, How the Saints Gave New Orleans a Reason to Believe. Alan, welcome to the program.
Great to be on.
Appreciate your being on the program. What a situation the Saints have gotten themselves into. I think this is unprecedented. Your head coach is suspended, the GM suspended, the assistant head coach, and all because of, well, you know what happened behind the scenes.
Well, everybody thinks they know what happened. I travel with the team, as do most of the media members, and in reality, what happened? There are these checks, these envelopes that they give out, a couple $100. It was a rallying thing that was there, but it was more of a motivational thing. Now there's a tape of Greg Williams, part of a documentary where they recorded him, and somebody leaked it to the press, probably somebody at the NFL, and you listen to it, he's saying, take out the head and the body will fall and all that. If you listen to it long enough, first off, you realize there's no bounties. He doesn't say, and by the way, if you take out Frank Gore, there's $5,000 for you.
Right.
Nowhere in the speech is the guy who was supposedly running, the scandal, talking about any of the money. And the other thing, it was an edited version. If you listen to the whole thing, he actually says at the end, don't hurt the team, don't go over the line. That just didn't make it to the publicly released file.
Well, what's interesting about this, too, is I remember listening to some of the clips and thinking there was no mention of money here. And I've also talked to a couple of other NFL players who said, you know what, I've heard this my whole career. I have some friends in high school who said the same thing. I mean, our coach told us worse than that when we were in high school ball.
Hey, you saw I managed Larry Holmes. That would have been nice if Larry had just said that. It's a rough and tumble sport. My belief and a lot of people's is that they have this concussion lawsuit by 700-plus former NFL players saying you didn't do enough to protect us.
Yeah.
I think the NFL overreacted to something that really wasn't there, and they've gone on. And the tip to the NFL came from a disgruntled former employee. So the credibility, why didn't he blow the whistle while he was an employee? If he was so self-righteous that he did it, And from a source in the situation, some of the materials, printed materials that the whistleblower turned in were suspect and may not have actually been real. And I think Roger Goodell overreacted. I know he can't get out of it. And look, the Saints aren't virgins there, but they are not the evil guys they're being made out to be.
Do you have any idea who the employee is?
Yeah, I do. Do I get shot through the phone if I say it? Based on my sources, and I believe they're very good, the former defensive quality control coach, his name is Mike Cerullo with a C, was let go after the Super Bowl season. And for whatever reasons, he was unable to find work in the NFL. And he believed that it was Greg Williams and Sean Payton and others in the Saints organization blocking him from getting other work. And to the best of the sources I have and everybody else has, and we all had that name, the Saints, we believe, have been told not to confirm anything, and they probably wouldn't. But it's Mike Cerullo, and he's an assistant coach at the University of Connecticut, based on my information.
Now, has anybody gotten in touch with Mike Cerullo to ask him about that?
Actually, this is the first time his name's put out there anywhere because nobody wanted to do it. And I asked your producer, I said, hey, I just feel like getting this off my chest. This is the guy. I've emailed the chancellor at the University of Connecticut and asked her how at the college level, where players are much more easily influenced, how can you have a man that participated in this program? He was there for that season. This supposedly all went on that season. He was in every meeting that season. And he told no one, while it's not about, fondling little boys, it's similar to what happened at Penn State. Oh, you saw it, and you waited, and you didn't do anything. And then when you lost your job, you felt compelled to go to the NFL and cry.
I kept hearing names like Jeremy Shockey. I think Warren Sapp said that.
It was not Jeremy Shockey. That was completely erroneous. There were a lot of rumors going on about who did it. Even in New Orleans, they were naming, lower-level guys. But, I'd be willing to bet what's in my checking account, which isn't always very much, that the initial snitch is Mike Cerullo.
Okay.
Hate to use the term snitch, but that's the best word I can think of.
What are the Saints going to do under the circumstances?
There's a debate about bringing in, a new head coach or something. I think that's reasonably far-fetched. They were hoping to some extent that maybe the appeals process would do something. But, look, the people running this team, for the most part, are the same guys that ran the team after Katrina.
Right.
I think they're in good hands. I think it's very, they're going to tell Sean Payton and Mickey Loomis and those guys, hey, you can't talk to, staff members. There's going to be communication from somebody's wife or something more than likely. I think the Saints will be competitive. They missed Sean Payton when he wasn't on the field last year. It wasn't quite right with offensive coordinator Pete Carmichael running the offense. The real problem is going to be they have to get Drew Brees signed and bring him in, which I think will happen before training camp. And then the issue is Sean and Drew have always shared like one brain, all these plays they drew up, and the offenses they were throwing in. Well, Sean's not there. So he'll have to try and do that with Pete Carmichael, who just isn't Sean Payton.
See, I was thinking when all this came down, I was thinking this is an opportunity for Drew Brees to just step up and say, look, I'm the quarterback, I'm the de facto head coach now, and this is how it's going to be.
I think he will because Drew's that kind of leader.
Yeah.
But the reality is he's Drew Brees and he's the quarterback. He's not Sean Payton, and he's got half of his information. But I think they're so solid on offense. Their free agency, a couple of wide receivers left. They replaced the guards and that kind of stuff.
Right.
I think the Saints will be right back in contention this year.
Alan, do you think, given all this information that's come out, this Bountygate thing, do you think this is something that goes on with other teams and they just
Absolutely.
have it? Yeah.
Players are saying that.
Yeah.
The guy who got hurt, because in all of this magical bounty system, we're going to go and hurt guys. Nobody got hurt. Yes, they hit Brett Favre a lot, but Brett Favre gets hit a lot. Quarterbacks get hit. You shift your offense to make sure your quarterback doesn't get hit. It's how the game is played. Kurt Warner was carted off the field, and he never played again. Kurt Warner said, I didn't think they were coming after me any more than anybody else, and the only reason I got hit was I was downfield. In all that time, there were no penalties called on the Saints for knocking anybody out of the games, and they didn't knock anybody out of the game, which begs the question, then where is this pot of gold?
Yeah.
It never existed. Mike Ornstein is a sports agent who supposedly put in $15,000 into this kitty. If you know Mike wouldn't give you 15 cents. You can't get Mike to buy you a Coca-Cola at the stand.
Really?
Yeah, he's a great guy, and he's lots of fun, and he's really interesting.
He's too cheap to put up bounties.
When I read that was the first thing when I read it. I said, well, this makes no sense.
Yeah.
I know Mike. Mike didn't put $15,000 in to get somebody hit.
All right. All right. Now, somebody, I hope you'll have the opportunity to get the accused on the phone and talk to him and find out if this is actually true or not.
I'm curious to see what he has to say myself.
Alan Donis, writer, filmmaker, comic, radio personality, author of the book Patron Saints: How the Saints Gave New Orleans a Reason to Believe. Alan, we'll have you back. Thank you so much.
Anytime. Thanks, guys.
A study is showing a link between dental x-rays and a type of a brain tumor. Lori London has more at the Health Desk for America's Radio News.
A study published this week in the journal Cancer poses a dental dilemma. It shows people who've had dental x-rays more likely to develop a type of brain tumor called meningioma than those who haven't. It doesn't prove that x-rays cause tumors, but supports previous research about the connection. Dental x-rays also have been implicated in thyroid cancer. Meningioma is most frequently occurring tumor in the brain. They're located in the meninges, the tissues covering the brain. The vast majority are benign or non-cancerous, but depending on their location, could cause blindness or serious neurological damage. The American Dental Association pointing out, though, that the study included people who received dental x-rays decades ago from older technology that exposed them to more radiation. From America's Radio News, I'm Lori London.
All right, thanks, Lori. Coming up on America's Radio News.
President Obama pressing for the Buffett rule in Florida.
Cell phone companies considering rendering a